can feel like a tear kind of coming down. And I'm just like, oh man, this really sucks. And it's just like growing and growing. And then I'm like crying. And I remember I was like hitting that verge of like where I just wanted to cry nonstop.
I went straight into a dark place, just dark depression. I just remember.
The best way to combat grief or anger is to get an action step, is to ask yourself, what kind of hope am I looking for?
Because I believed in the power of my body. Even though they kept telling me there is no other way, I wasn't listening to that. I was just thinking, no, there is a way. There is a way. There is a way. And it was just mentally battling what they kept telling me.
Healing graves holistically, there's not much out there at all. We're kind of in this unknown territory. So we're inviting you guys into our personal journey. We may not know all the answers, but guess what? We're going to try to figure it out as much as we can.
My name is Meron and I'm based in the UK and I'm the founder of Loving Me Kindly.
And my name is Priscilla and I'm based in the United States and I'm the founder of Healing Unapologetically.
Together we are co-hosting our podcast, Thyroid Sisters Navigate Graves' Disease. Over the last few years, since being diagnosed with Graves' disease, we have fought to gain our lives back and are both living medication-free.
We are not medical experts. However, through our experience of dealing with this disease, we have learned so much and want to share our journey of healing and self-discovery.
We have come to realize that trusting our instincts and intuition has helped us lead healthier lives, and our goal with these podcasts is to empower and inspire you. I'm so excited to get into this conversation. Oh my goodness. I don't know why this one is really resonated with me or hit a nerve or something. I just want to get into it and I just can't wait to see where this podcast takes us. But before we begin, oh my gosh, I want to know about the polls that you did and the results you got from the question that you asked.
Yes. So this podcast is about experiencing grief with a diagnosis. And I was really curious to see how many people in my community felt grief with their diagnosis. So I did a poll on Instagram and I did two polls. So the first poll, 86% voted yes, that they did feel grief with their diagnosis, and 14% said no. The following day, I did another another poll. And those numbers were similar. 73% said yes, and 27 said no. So that's a big chunk, I think, of, that's more than 50% of people are feeling grief with their diagnosis. And I had a lot of people actually reach out and express a little bit of their stories with why they didn't experience grief. So I don't know if we want to mention that now or later, but grief and relief kind of go hand in hand with the diagnosis. Yeah. And I realized that that was something that I personally experienced. I actually went through both emotions of grief and relief. I had some people in my community experience purely grief. Other people just experienced relief. So it's a very, I think, like we were talking, not heavy, but maybe heavy with emotion subject, because at least for me, I was very disconnected from the feeling of grief. But we'll talk about this. I don't know if you want to jump in on it, on what our idea of grief is.
Oh, you know me. Yes, I want to jump right into it. I want to know, because I wonder, I think you did two different wordings when you did the poll.
Yes. Oh yeah, that's right. So my first one, I just mentioned quickly, like, did you experience grief in your diagnosis? Let me know. Here's the poll. And I was talking to my older sister, and I realized that I was telling her, I said, I don't think I experienced grief. And this is when I realized like how emotionally disconnected you can be from your diagnosis. And she was like, well, she's like, I do remember when you were just diagnosed, you came over. And at that time, she had her son and she went through her own holistic healing because her son was sick. And I shared a little bit on my previous stories about her. But so my sister was a big motivation for me. But anyways, I went to her and she said I cried. And I do not remember this at all. And because her little boy, that was interesting. And her little boy was sick. So I looked at him and he was getting better. My sister was doing everything to get him well without, conventional medicine. And she said, I looked at him and I said, you're giving me hope, because I was seeing him getting better. And when I had that conversation with my sister, I've realized like maybe the perception, like the idea of grief, the word grief has a very different meaning for me, that I just disassociated with it. But in reality, I did experience grief. So that's why I did the second poll. And the second poll, immediately after talking with my sister, I went online, I looked up the definition of grief, because I think we all get our own idea and we just kind of assume that that's what this word means. And for me, I associated grief with like a moment of sadness, of watching someone in sadness. It was almost like an image. And I was just like, no, that's not how I felt. But the truth is, the definition of grief means keen mental suffering or distress over affliction or loss, sharp sorrow, and painful regret. And when I read that definition, so many words resonated: mental suffering, distress, affliction, loss, painful regret, and sorrow. Like all of that, I was like, oh my gosh, I experienced grief. I didn't realize that I was experiencing grief.
So you've experienced sorrow and regret and all the other words but when you heard the word grief, you thought, no, I don't think I felt sad. Well, yes. You said for you it was sadness. For me, when I hear the word grief, I think of something I've lost that I can't get back. And that was so immediate for me to know I experienced grief with my diagnosis. It was so immediate. There was zero disconnect. I knew I've lost, and the person that I lost was myself. I couldn't, and that was what I was trying to get myself back. I lost myself. So that's why for me there was such a resonation with grief. But then for you, it was a different journey, a different thing. That's so interesting. So
there was a disconnect for me. But I think, like we've mentioned, being diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, whether or not it's Graves', can be very overwhelming. And I always use that word to describe my diagnosis, that I feel like knowing how I am, I suppress a lot of my natural feelings. So now, even though it's been years later, I feel like I'm digging through those feelings and I'm allowing myself to feel them and to realize, oh, I actually did feel that, but I just learned to suppress things. And which isn't good.
No.
And I'm a big fan of Dr. Gabor Mate, and he actually discusses that there's a high percentage of people, and there's actually studies of this, many studies of people who are more prone to autoimmune diseases are people who suppress their feelings or suppress their anger, are people who just suppress their emotions. And I totally resonate with that. And just having this discussion about grief made me realize, like, we have to learn. It's so not that we have to learn. It's okay to go through those emotions.
I think that's so interesting that you brought that up about suppressing emotions, because before we were starting this podcast, I just had this. I was reminiscing about a time when I was at university, and there was another student that had the powers of, like, prophetic powers or something like that, and where he could tell you things about yourself. So my friends were like, oh my gosh, Miriam, there's this guy in the library, he told us things about ourselves, come, let him do you, and I thought, okay, all right then, whatever. I don't know. I was like, okay, cool. So I went there and I just sat in front of him and I was like, oh, could you do me please? And he just stared and just was so because I saw him do my friends, and it was very quick. Yep, you're like this, da 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 da, and you're gonna might come across these challenges, da 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 da. And it was like, me, can you do me now? And then he was just like, just so cautious, like just slow. I don't know how to explain it. Like maybe he had a lot coming in. He was just like, okay, this person. This is way before Graves. I was 18 or 19, I can't remember, and I was diagnosed when I was 26. So maybe he knew what was coming. But what he said to me was, he just looked at me and said, you need to stop suppressing your emotions. It's not going to be good for you. And I never forgot it. He said, you suppress your emotions all the time. He said it's healthy to let it out. Just remember that. He said other things too, but that's what I remember. That's the thing that I remember the most.
That stood out.
When I look back and I felt the grief of this having Graves' disease and all that it came with, and part of when you look at is it 5 stages or 7 stages of grief? One of them is bargaining. And I looked at that and I thought, no, I don't think I bargained. I don't think I went through that stage. But when I look back, I actually do. I do that a lot, because I think back and I go, why didn't I listen to that guy? Maybe if I listened to him and I didn't suppress my emotions, maybe then I wouldn't have this, thyroid disease. Or maybe if I didn't do this, and maybe if I didn't do that, why couldn't I speak up for myself? Why did I have to be so suppressed? And I thought indifference, I used to use indifference as a tool. Just it kept me safe. Neither it was like a place where you just shut yourself down, right? When you're indifferent to things, whatever you're going through, things that I was going through, the way I handled it was indifference, just no care. And I thought that was good, not to feel neither one way or another, but it was detrimental to me. And it was until after I got the Graves' disease that I realized how detrimental that was. And I wish I hadn't done that. And I've learned to undo that. I do not go in. I feel what I need to feel. I say what I need to say. I started blogging. I started using methods to help me. That was cathartic, to get it out, to speak about it, to use it as a vessel to self-discovery and everything. So it's interesting. We had two different journeys with it, but I definitely resonate with the grief for me. That
it's interesting is that you mentioned, like, you started to blog and to write and to like kind of express yourself that way. I know we've talked a lot about this, like how we found each other on Instagram, kind of doing similar work where we're sharing our stories and connecting. And I think that you just kind of mentioned it. I do feel like being on Instagram kind of became an outlet for me to say what I felt, because I think you're an individual that you kind of just one of your defense mechanisms is to suppress how you feel. Having this community kind of gave me the allowance to say, I'm going to speak my feelings, because I never allowed myself to do it. And it's a work in progress. Like, obviously I'm a lot better about it now, but I do feel like we were like just not too long ago talking about it. Like, why did I start this account? And I don't know why that just resonated so much with me right now when you said came online. And I was like, I think that was my way of feeling safe to share and talk about my feelings. But it's so weird because, like, it's like polar opposite. You're going from not talking, not allowing or suppressing your emotions, to like sharing with people. But
because you share a lot with people. I would never have thought. Yeah, I would never have thought you went through a phase where you didn't like to share, because you share so much. What did something happen where you realized that you suppressed your emotions? Were you aware, and then you thought, this isn't healthy for me, can you change this?
I think that so I'm very close to my older sister, and she's been a big part of my healing journey. And I think that for a lot of like just privacy reasons, I wouldn't share much about her. But recently we've talked, and she's, she loves that I'm doing this. She's supporting me. And I told her, I said, you're a big part of my story. And she was just like, hey, like, don't keep me anonymous. You can talk about it. And I feel like she was my safe space. And I think that that's why I never felt that I suppressed my feelings, but it was because she was my safe space. And but I would suppress it. Like if I'm out and about, like seeing my doctor, like having that one-on-one conversation with my doctor, I would suppress my feelings. If I was with other people, I never spoke up. I never said, I wouldn't even, like, if I didn't understand something, I wouldn't even say, I don't understand. Like, I'll just be like, okay, okay. And then I'll just walk out and I'll be like, it's just really strange. And I mentioned that in one of my, this on one of my Instagram posts, how I found myself like during my healing journey, like having to actually use my voice. And I connected it with being almost like my thyroid, because your voice box is so close to your thyroid. I almost felt like when I started to speak up, like my thyroid was also getting better. And I just kind of correlated it like a poetic, like
Absolutely. Yeah.
justice kind of thing that was occurring. But I felt like the more and more I spoke up, in areas where I didn't feel safe, but I just was still speaking up, I just felt like I was healing more. And that's what I mean by suppressing my feelings. Like, it was just when I needed to speak up, I wouldn't. But I had my safe space, which was my sister. And, I would vent and talk to her and tell her everything. But in day-to-day life, I wasn't expressing it in a healthy way. So
That's so interesting, because when we were talking before, we said that there's this thing between grief and relief with the diagnosis and your journey with Graves' disease, and our journeys with Graves' disease. So it's like you get the relief that you finally figured out what's wrong with you, what all these symptoms are and everything, and everyone has their journey with that. Some it's quick, some, like me, it was the walnut smoothie with something else, because if you haven't heard, that was in our first podcast episode. And everyone has their different thing, but and then it's I don't know, I mean, I resonated with the grief, and I just remember going through the stages: the shock, the denial, the anger. I was stuck in anger for a long time, and definitely depression and everything. But then there is this relief as well in it, because you realize you start unlearning and undoing the things that no longer serve you, no longer are helpful for you. So the relief of being cathartic and for me it was blogging and writing and journaling, and for you it was speaking up and starting your Instagram and sharing. So that's like a relief again. So I feel like it's like this dance of grief and relief throughout. I think it's really interesting.
I think that's why I'm so happy that we're doing this and we're creating this space, because if I think of who can we reach that may be buried under grief or buried under their diagnosis, or they're feeling lost, or they don't feel like they have someone that they can talk to, or someone that can validate what they're feeling.
Just what I was gonna say. Yeah.
Because I think that sometimes you beat yourself up so much, and a lot of it is just normal. Like it's okay to feel grief, and it's okay not to feel grief. It's okay to feel relief. Like, I felt both. I felt relief because I knew, like, this is the source of why I haven't been well. Like, I finally had an answer, and that brought me relief. So the important thing is that it's okay to feel what you're feeling. I think the most important thing with these emotions is to process them instead of getting stuck.
Yes.
So
stuck. Yeah. And like I said, I think I was stuck in anger, and I just teetered in between. There was like long periods where I just stayed in each stage: denial, shock. And I think the grief came when I realized that it's not curable. But the doctor told me it's treatable, and I took that for it's curable. They're going to cure me. I'm going to take the drugs, the medication, the medication, and I'm going to be okay, because I've never heard of a chronic illness. I think it was when I realized, because I'm the type of person, if something's not working, I will figure it out. There's A, B, C, D, all the way to Z of possibilities. I'm very half full? Yeah, I'm very like, there's always a way. I'll figure it out. There's always a way around it. So when I went through the alphabet and got to Z, I think, and I realized, this doesn't get better. You have this forever, and you're young. You never think you're going to get an illness forever. That's a long forever. I mean,
Yeah.
God willing that you live long and you have a long life. That's a long time that you just look ahead and you just think, this is my life, this thing that has
Yeah.
taken so much from me. I'm no longer social. I just want to be by myself. Nobody understands me. Some people think I'm being a hypochondriac. Are you
Well,
really
no.
sick? You don't look sick. That one,
Um,
where you have to explain it, and you lose
mm,
yourself. So that for me, it's the loss of self. This,
mm,
and there's no way of getting it back, because you're telling me that there's no cure, but I've never
mhm.
heard of. But you're a doctor. I didn't know that there was things that you can get where there's no cure. And
Yeah.
that's when I think I reached just grief and despair, and then depression for a long time.
Mhm.
And what got me out of it was a stranger. It's always for me these angels in my life, a phlebotomist saying, there's value in the valley. And I was like, what? There's value in
Yeah.
this? What are you talking about? And then just having a different perspective on it took me out of my grief. So I'm very grateful for that. So yeah, having this podcast hopefully will help somebody, because if it wasn't for that phlebotomist, I don't know, might not have started my journaling and my blogs and things like that, and I wouldn't be where I am today. It just took one person to change the perspective and show me there's hope out of the
Yeah.
grief, because I
Mhm.
think hope must be the cure for grief, because grief is just like despair, hopeless,
Yeah.
a place where there is no
Yeah.
hope. Yeah.
Mhm. That's why community is so important, because
Yeah.
when you're left alone, when you're with your own thoughts, you're not getting much perspective outside of just whatever you want to self-talk, like the talk that you want to tell yourself. That's why it's important to have a safe space, a safe community with people who can like give you the outside perspective and say, hey, like that there's hope in the valley, right? That's what he
Yeah,
said.
there's value in the valley. There's things that you're here to
Yeah.
learn. Like for you, that you
So it's
realize you had to speak up, and for me, I thought I had to speak
yes.
up, and there's value in this, and
Yeah.
the whole self-discovery and finding the purpose in it, for me, helped, because that's just the
Exactly.
way I am wired. It helps me to find the purpose in the pain.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
it's when you were mentioning too, how like overwhelming the diagnosis was because it was so severe, that is absolutely what blindsided me, was the feeling of like, this isn't a quick fix. This
Yes.
isn't like, here's a medication, take it for 2 weeks and you'll be better. It was like for life, like
Yeah.
you mentioned. It's like something that I didn't, and there was no real reassurance on how much, like how well would I get with the radioactive iodine treatment? Will it really take away symptoms? No one can say. It was just like there was still a lot of unknowns with the treatments, and that's the part where I think I was so shocked and had a harder time processing, was that part. Like, what? Like, this
Nobody
isn't a,
knows.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's a lot to take in. And I think that's what I want to validate. I understand that if you're, dealing with another autoimmune disease, like maybe the process of grief looks differently. I did talk to somebody else who their diagnosis was psoriasis, and they shared that they didn't feel grief when they were diagnosed with psoriasis, because at the moment it was just such a small patch and it was hidden, and the dermatologist just said, here's the steroid cream, you're fine. It wasn't until like years later when that person started to realize that the psoriasis is spreading, the cream isn't doing its job, and then all of a sudden it was like, I'm feeling depressed about this. Now I have to take experimental drugs. Now the doctor's telling me there's no cure. It's just kind of like this, it's just a different experience, I've had somebody else share that they were dealing with fertility issues, and then in the middle of that, they figured out that she had Graves. So for her, that was a relief. So I realized that being diagnosed is a different process for people. And it's okay if you don't feel grief. It's okay if you feel relief. It's okay if you feel angry, or it's okay if you're trusting and you just think that you're going to get better. And maybe years later, you realize you don't. that's all okay, because it's a different process for all of us, you know.
But I think you won't feel grief when you're diagnosed, because you don't know what you're in for. That's the problem. And the problem is later down the line, when you're silently going through these little things, it's like a little piece of you has been taken away. It's so subtle and so little, and even you question yourself, but I'm taking the medication and I still don't feel right, or I'm not taking the medication anymore and I still don't feel right. Why is my body, is this disconnect from your body? And it's this slow process, because I remember it being a slow process for me. And because I got diagnosed and I didn't get it, you know, like I said, they gave me the medication. I didn't know enough to feel the grief yet. I hadn't lost anything just yet, because I didn't know what I was going to lose. And I went traveling and I did the things that I wanted to do. I took the medication. I came back. They said, well, you don't really need the medication anymore. And I thought, great. Okay, carry on with life. No, I'm still not feeling right, actually. And then going back to the doctor and him saying, well, you should feel right. You should feel okay, because your levels are normal. And then feeling alone. So it's like step 1, feeling alone. Step 2, confusion. Step 3, not knowing where to go. Step 4, there was like these stages into the grief. I didn't even realize I was stepping into the valley slowly. So it's, and then you're in it. And I don't think you would feel it's in the beginning stages, because you don't know what you're in for. You don't know what it feels like to have an autoimmune until you're in it, like into it. So I think it's interesting when people say they haven't felt grief. I mean, that's good. But and also, especially for us, we really care about I'm not saying people don't care, just for me, I wanted that quality of life back. Having medication doesn't mean that I'm having that quality of life back. And I've seen people that say, well, why aren't you on medication? I am, and I'm fine. It's like, but that's not for me. Like, I want what I had before. I don't want to have medication. I don't want to manage this disease for the rest of my life. I'm not okay with that. Or why haven't you got it removed? I have, and I'm fine. And it's like, so people, for them it's okay, and they wouldn't feel the grief.
I don't understand. Yeah. It's an interesting, we're in an interesting position in this community, and I want to acknowledge our thyroid sisters who did get their thyroid removed, whether it was a thyroidectomy or who did do the radioactive iodine. I also want to acknowledge the thyroid sisters who are taking the medication and they're feeling better. I really do feel like I heard that same message a lot. Well, I took the thyroid medication and I feel better. This isn't my way is better than your way. And I've also heard the opposite, where women would share stories of, I did the radioactive iodine and I wish I didn't. I want to hear both sides of the stories. I want to hear the stories of the women women or men who are feeling better with the treatment option, with conventional treatment options. And I also want to hear the women who aren't feeling better. And then there's women like us who are fine, or there's women who do both integrative. And then there's women who are like us, we're trying to figure it out without the aid of medication or procedures. But it's a very tricky gray area, because my experience with medication is just like a week of it. I've already shared that I had a severe reaction. I couldn't take it. That's what changed my path into finding a holistic alternative treatment. But I am still very curious to create a space for all women with thyroid issue or with Graves who had treated it with conventional medicine, because there's still a lot there that we can do to improve, but I don't know why I felt really called to acknowledge that, because I do feel like I don't want anyone to feel excluded if they're hearing this podcast and they're feeling like, oh, well, I got my radioactive iodine treatment or I got my thyroidectomy. There's still a lot of value with your story, with your experience in this community. And if there's one thing I wished, was that there was more light brought onto women who are who do go through these treatment options, men or women, sorry, Graves' disease does affect men. I know I always say women, but women are the majority statistically who suffer from Graves. To share a light on this, because there's a lot of women who do not feel well after they choose those treatment. And I feel like their voice is just kind of being left behind. And I'm trying to do more research. I always tell women who do take the medication route to make sure they're supplementing with selenium and vitamin D. I share with them the case studies. You can print those case studies to your doctors if they're not recommending selenium or vitamin D, but there's a high rate of women who go into remission when they do take anti-thyroid medication alongside selenium and vitamin D. They actually go into remission a lot quicker than they would if they were just taking the medication alone. So I understand that the treatment or the answer for some people may be conventional. Like, we all have our different perspective on it. And I don't want anyone to feel like there's just one way. You have to prioritize, like you said, the quality of life. Maybe for you, it means having to treat it without medication. Like you explained, you want to feel better. You want your life back. You don't want to go into that routine. And maybe for other women, they're like, I'm okay with it. I'm going to take the medication, but you don't have to do it. You can do it with integrative medicine, which is both. I just really want to put that out there.
It's such a personal journey. I can only speak for what I went through and my personal journey. And every single person will have their own personal journey and what's a priority for them, and what it all depends on the person. And for me, I thought, well, my body has obviously come out of balance and I want it to come back into balance, but naturally, that was what it was important for me. I just wanted it to fix itself naturally because I believed in the power of my body. Even though they kept telling me there is no other way, I wasn't listening to that. I was just thinking, no, there is a way, there is a way, there is a way. And it was just mentally battling what they kept telling me. So for me, that's why. And for some people, if it works for them, then they're not going to feel the grief. If they're able to have their quality of life and be on the medication, then that's really good for people.
You're right. I think that we all are looking for action steps to take. I think that probably helps us deal with the grief or deal with whatever emotion that we're dealing with is counteracting it with some action step. And I think that's why some people choose to go straight into a treatment option, and other individuals look for finding a more sustainable way without the aid of pharmaceuticals to help them get there. It just kind of depends on your action step. But the best way to combat grief or anger is to get an action step, is to ask yourself, what kind of hope am I looking for? So like you mentioned, you believe that your body can heal. And that's kind of like the message that I looked into. And that was the message that transformed my whole approach. And also like having eyewitness account of other people who have gone through uncurable diagnosis to only heal holistically. When you see that gives you so much hope. And I had that. And I realized that that's a huge, big part of my story and the reason why I was able to. And I think that's why I'm putting my message out, because I want someone else to see that it can happen. Because then they can not lose hope. They can continue looking for the answers, looking for the treatments that best suits them. But don't get stuck in grief. It's okay to feel it. It's okay to cry. Do you remember how you felt when you went through, like when you realized that you were grieving?
I went straight into a dark place, just dark depression. I just remember. And that's not me. Again, it's the loss of me, because I'm very upbeat, bubbly. I didn't even know what depression was at the time. I'm not saying that I had an easy life. I didn't. But I still was always trying to figure out I always try to figure out a way. That's just the way I am. Literally anything that happens, I'll try to figure out a way. And when I couldn't, then I went into dark depression and just just stopped. I just stopped functioning. So, and do I remember crying? Definitely
Yeah.
sure I cried a lot. It's funny because you don't remember the crying. I probably did. It's the other sticky emotions that I remember, the anger, the depression. I'm sure I cried a lot. Yeah. I just can't remember it. It's probably
So
too
funny.
many to
So
remember.
yeah, and stuff, there can be highs and lows, you can have
Yeah.
many, but I do remember, like, I think because I was doing the poll on my account, I was reliving like how I felt when I was diagnosed. But one of the first things I remembered I did was, I had actually family in town that they were visiting from out of state. So it was kind of hard to process that diagnosis with like a house full of so many people.
Oh my
And then like you're
God.
having to explain like why you're having to leave and come back, and I'm going to see my doctor, and people were like, what's Graves' disease? Or just like,
Yes. What's crazy?
kind of like, oh, I'm sorry, they just, but they don't know what that even means. But I do remember going upstairs and just kind of like plopping on the bed,
Oh
like just letting myself
wow.
just go. And in a way, like, this sucks, right? Like, I remember thinking like, this sucks. And I'm kind of like laying there and I can feel like a tear kind of coming down. And I'm just like, oh man, this really sucks. And it's just like growing and growing. And then I'm like crying. And I remember I was like hitting that verge of like where I just wanted to cry nonstop. Like I was gonna lose control. Like I was just gonna cry and cry. I can feel this ledge that I was standing on. And I was about to just jump off and just be like, what? Like going.
It's grief. And it's interesting you said to your sister, I don't remember experiencing grief. And then you went at that moment.
Yeah. But the funny thing was I caught myself. I said, no,
Mm,
no, no, no. Because I literally felt like I was not going to stop. Like I was just going to keep going. And that
a lot.
scared me just as much. Yeah. And I
Where is
said,
that coming
no. I
from?
said,
All of those, like that's all that
I
sadness.
think there was a little bit of a pity party. It wasn't just
Mm,
grief. I think I wanted to be like my life. So I think that would have been depression. I think if I would have allowed myself to jump off that ledge, it was almost like this, um, life hates me, or it was just dark.
mm.
And I felt that, and I said no. I said no, no, no. I said I'm going to give myself 5 minutes. I'm going to give myself 5 minutes to cry, and then I'm going to go to sleep. And then when I wake up, I'm going to figure it out. I don't know how that looks like, but I'm going to figure it out. And that's what I did. I went to sleep. I woke up. I actually felt better, which is so ironic because I'm doing research on sleep. But I know we were talking like we need to do a
Oh yeah.
podcast on sleep. I totally agree because sleep was a big part of my healing journey. But in my research, I'm learning that there are 4 hormones that are released during sleep. And one of them, I can't say the name because I don't know how to pronounce it and I forgot. But it's basically a natural painkiller. Your body has a natural painkiller that it's released during sleep. And the reason why I'm doing this research is because I'm going back in my old post and I put that part of my healing journey was getting REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement sleep. So the research that I'm doing now is just to support why that was so important. And that's why, because you're during REM sleep, you're getting these 4 hormones that are released, and natural painkiller is one. And I've realized throughout my life, sleep, like telling myself, let's just get some sleep, I always felt better. And there's
Always.
the science to prove it. Your body actually releases a natural painkiller. Isn't that interesting? I was just like, my brain was just
Well, now
like,
I know why. But yeah, I was always knew I felt better if I'm having an emotional meltdown the day before and then I have a good. I'm like,
yeah. Or when
why
you're
doesn't it
feeling
feel that
sick.
bad anymore today? Yeah.
Yes. I know recently I was sick too. I was dealing with like some sinus
Yeah.
issues. And right when I was starting to feel better, because I'm a mom, so my sleep was completely off. And when I was finally getting rest, I like had to get up to care for my son. But after I did that, I asked my husband, I said, can you watch over? Because I feel like I just need to sleep. That's what got me into like wanting to research sleep more in detail, because I fell asleep. I woke up like about an hour and a half later, and I was like 90% feeling like just so much better.
Yeah, but that's amazing that you knew that, and that comes into our conversation of being intuitive and tuning into yourself and knowing what you need. It's all, I mean, that's what that's the message that underlies everything that we're saying, isn't it? To connect with
Yes,
yourself.
sure.
And sometimes it's just something simple as, well, you need to drink more water,
Yeah.
or you should be going to bed earlier, and these
Oh
little
yeah, it
things.
sounds like your grandma telling you get to sleep, or like
Yeah,
some
your
kind
inner
of like,
grandma.
yeah, like, okay. But it's so fun to read the science now and see how much there's so much science supporting why that's so effective. It's really cool. It's just however you process, your emotions. It's just important to allow yourself to feel it. So, and then I think it's also just important to get into an action plan,
Yeah.
look
Journal.
at your resources, journal, figure out what your options are. Don't feel like you have to jump into anything too quickly. And yeah, just make sure you're understanding what treatment option you want. Make sure you are understanding all your options. Because I find that the reason why I delayed getting like a more permanent procedure like radioactive iodine was because the people who were sharing at that time on YouTube were sharing that they were experiencing hypothyroidism and their symptoms never got better. So the only thing that improved was they weren't at risk of having a thyroid, or no, I don't want to say thyroid storm, but having a risk of heart failure
Like
at that
fatality.
point.
Yeah.
Fatality. Yeah. It's almost like, let's get this off the table, which is what your doctor's trying to do. But that doesn't necessarily translate that your quality of life will get better. And I always felt like that's what's missing is the patient's perspective in all this. And which is why you and I are on here sharing. That's why I want to say, like, I welcome anybody with any autoimmunity, with any thyroid issue, whether you have Hashimoto's or hypothyroidism or hyper or Graves like us, or any other chronic illness, because we really need to speak about the patient's perspective, because doctors aren't here to tell you your quality of life is going to improve. They're just saying we're going to remove these risks. You're at higher risk if you have this condition than you do if you're on this medication, which is basically like, right, what the trade-off is. But I think the patient perspective is, what about the quality of life?
Which is not considered at all, of course, because like you said, they're just looking to save you or take out
it's just
whatever
they're outweighing the risks. Sorry,
so it's up to you to
yeah
implement that. But then how far would they? That's why, like you said, we have this community where we can talk about the patient's perspective and raise awareness about what would help us, because living a life where you are you have a low quality of life is not easy. It's not easy. You just go to work just because, I mean, work in itself becomes this minefield. Like this, it's so difficult for me. Like, maybe we can talk about that in another podcast, where you're managing your illness and you have to show up like everybody else, other people who don't have a chronic illness, and everybody in your workplace is looking at you like you're a normal person because it's an invisible disease. So you need to we want to get that quality of life back up, because it's just not okay to live a low quality of life and then have to live like everybody else in this world. It's like a dog eat dog world. It's so much harder. Just getting up is hard. All this small tasks that people can take for granted is hard. You don't know how you're going to feel some morning. Sometimes you can be in full body pain, but still have to step up and go to work and smile and do all the things that everybody else is expecting of you, and suffer silently. And then you have to look after your kids and do everything. Like, life doesn't stop. Life doesn't wait for you. You have to just get on with it and carry on. And that's why we're fighting for that quality of life. Because that's a challenge in itself. So I think There's
for
just so
sure.
much to it. There's so many things.
Daily tasks become a challenge. That's what living with an autoimmune disease, living with chronic pain is, that I think people have a hard time accepting who don't understand that, is it's a challenge to get up, literally. If you've ever dealt with insomnia or chronic fatigue, like, existing is extremely difficult. I can't explain it's like you're going through your day with chains on your back. Imagine, like, I don't know, extra weight on your back that you're just pulling. Every step is like it just feels you're weighted down. I don't know.
Yeah,
I felt that,
absolutely.
at least with chronic fatigue. But yeah, daily tasks are extremely challenging. And I remember I got to this place where I was like, starting to work out. I was getting a routine, right? I was doing my 9 to 5. And then in the evenings, I was having my workout. That was also my social life during that time. And then I would just come home. And I remember feeling content because I was starting to be able to do a little bit more for myself. I was feeling a little better. Exercise is so good. Movement is so good for you. And I was feeling those benefits. But I was in my late 20s, and this is when I realized that people have this idea of like, well, why aren't you married? Or why don't you have a boyfriend? And blah, 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 blah. And I was here just happy because I was able to like get out of the house, finally do something social. And then you have the social pressure of, why aren't you living this life that should look like this at your age? And I remember this one time I was even asked if I was depressed, and I was just like, what? I'm not depressed.
You're just trying to manage what's going on.
I was just like, and I think that's when I realized there's this huge disconnect with like what in the society, and understanding what autoimmunity is, what chronic pain is. It's not normal. You're absolutely right. When you look at a woman in her 20s, in late 20s, you're wondering, why don't you have more going on for you? And but I don't think that's the right approach. I think that autoimmunity is taking over so much in our society that we need to start looking into it more seriously. And it's not depression. I don't think people choose. I did not choose this life. I didn't know I was going to be buried under chronic pain. And it's kind of harsh to hear someone say that to you, but I was just kind of like, huh? I was so confused. I was just like, but
I'm just trying to survive here, and then somebody
throws you. I'm just showing up. You just realize that people, and at this point, I didn't know I had thyroid issues. Like, I was dealing with undiagnosed thyroid issues at that point. And, it's just kind of like an interesting perspective on how people have, like, the world always projects things on you, like where you should be, living, what you should have. And yesterday, I actually shared a post. I was just kind of playing outside with my baby, and I realized that I never would really allow myself to imagine marriage and being a mother. Not because like I didn't want those things. It just, I just felt very disconnected to it. Like, I would say, if it happens, it happens, but I never felt this desire that it was going to happen. It was just like everything was so buried under my chronic pain. And even the idea of marriage and motherhood, it just seemed like a distant fantasy. So now when I have my son, there's a lot of times where I'm like with family, and my parents I'm like, can you believe I have a baby? We're still like, wow, like processing, like, because it just seems so out of reach for so many years in my life. And I was 37 years old when I had my son. So I went through all my 20s, most of my 30s, with the idea that I didn't know if I was ever going to be a mother. And I never really allowed myself to get fixated on the idea. I just knew that if it happened, it happened. It was just kind of left alone like that. I didn't focus on my age. I didn't focus on anything else. It just was somewhere here, but yeah, I don't know what got me going down that
But
route.
because that's where I am, and then that's how I found you, and how I found your what you're putting on your Instagram so inspirational for me, because I was where you were, and and I am still there now. I want to start a family, and I'm thinking, but I get exhausted just doing the dishes. How on earth am I going to manage having a child? And I see my friends and how challenging it is. Of course, everything that it comes with. And sometimes I just want to just be under my duvet cover some days where I just can't face the world. But then how am I going to do that and manage the what I'm the all the symptoms that come with having a chronic illness, and then have and do something that's going to be so challenging to all my senses? Is going to challenge me on
Yeah.
every level. How am I going to step up
Yeah.
to that? And I always wanted to be a mother, and I still want to, that's something that I've yearned for forever. I'm super broody at the moment as well. I mean, I got married last year, and but I'm worried at the same time. And then I saw you, and I saw that you can do it, and it's inspired me. But then that's how what we're saying. It's so many things that you think, I wish I could just have that thought and just go for it. But there's so many things that chain you and
Hold you back.
weigh you down with the chronic illness, where everything you want to do, you have to think about so many things. Like, work is hard. Not being a wife is hard, but obviously there's things that
With the
you're just too tired to do. You want to cook, but sometimes you're just too tired to cook. You want to be there for your husband, and you're just too tired to do it. It's just everything. I feel like you constantly experience grief. Constantly. It can happen all the time. Or if I'm walking down restaurants, and I love food. I love food. And we went out yesterday evening, and I wanted to eat all the things that we used to eat, all the spots that we used to go to. But now I have to think, oh, well, I don't have gluten, I don't have dairy, I don't have sugar, and I I see the ice cream, I want it, and I can't have it. Grief. It's like, I'm not making light of grief.
It's like,
you just keep going through these emotions all the time.
Yes.
It's constant.
It's a reminder. Like,
it's reminders of what you used to have, or how things used to be. But then at the same time, if I really think about it, so much has changed positively for me because of this illness. I've tried to change it from pain to purpose, and I've used my voice more, and I've grown more, and I've changed things around. So there's that. Again, that's the relief, isn't it?
Yes.
And then it's back. It's just back and forward every time, every moment of the day.
Well, we'll have to definitely do a podcast on diet. I think that's like one of my biggest questions that I get, but it's interesting to hear you describe that, because I think that every individual that reaches out to me that does talk about diet mentions that.
Yeah.
Like, I miss eating this. I don't give up this. And the thing with healing an autoimmune disease or thyroid is you want to get to a place where you can enjoy those foods in moderation. You just have to see yourself going through a period of your life where you have to really be selective so that you can get to that quality of life that you want to live. And so I always kind of told myself, hey, this is how I made myself not get sad about it. I would be like, hey, you lived a life. But before I got diagnosed with Graves' disease, I never punished myself with food. I never felt guilty if I ate something that was bad. I didn't have that. Food, I was an emotional eater. So food was my friend. Food made me feel better.
Food was my friend too, yeah.
So, so I really was like, if I want an ice cream, I'm going to get an ice cream and I'm going to enjoy it. And it was just indulge. I indulge and indulge. And that's what I told myself. Hey, you've had years of indulging, of eating to your heart's content, of having zero guilt. You will survive. You will survive having a couple weeks or maybe a month or a year of not having those foods. Appreciate, what's the word? Be thankful that you did have that in your life. You did enjoy it. You're not really deprived. You feel deprived because you're not having it in that moment. But you're not really deprived.
It just reminds me. I don't know if that's a really good point. But then it's not for a little while. It's forever, because sugar is not good for you.
Yes.
It's gluten is inflammatory. Why you have to say goodbye to these foods. if you really
but
want
you
to
do
get better.
you do. And I want to say, like, I'm at a place where I've been, oh gosh, am I going 5 years into remission? But I can enjoy if I'm out and about visiting family somewhere where you're away from your environment, your choices, you're in a group. So, you can't have everything be accommodated to you.
Yeah,
I'm at a point where I can have something that's considered inflammatory without having the inflammatory consequences immediately, because my body's at a place that it's balanced to the point that it's healing faster than it is creating disease, right?
amazing.
And so that's why I want to tell individuals, it's not that you can never indulge in these foods. There's just going to be a time and place for them. And the time and place isn't every single day, because I had those foods every single day. And that's where I had to learn that wasn't sustainable for my body and for my health. And also, while you are making these adjustments and you are, let's say, craving ice cream or certain foods, you have to find an alternative that you're okay subbing it with. It's not going to be the real deal. It's not maybe going to be something that you're going to enjoy as much as, like, whatever it is that you're craving. But the best way to go through it is to find an alternative. Don't torture yourself and feel like you can't, it just makes it harder that way. But
I
I
know.
know it's
And then it's
different for
reaching, well, then this is it. It's reaching acceptance. Maybe I haven't reached accepting that I can't have these foods that I really want. I love cake. Do you know what? When I went to, I've done so well with the no sugar thing. I'm so
Yeah.
proud of myself. And when I can have honey. So when I overindulge in the honey, and my husband says, "But don't you think you've had too much honey lately?" I get so upset because I'm like, "Do you know
I
what?
know.
I
Yeah,
can
yeah,
have this honey, this little
yeah.
bit of, indulgence. Allow me the honey because I've given up the cakes and the cupcakes and the ice cream and all those
I
things."
know.
And
Mhm.
watching people, sometimes I'm okay, but if it's in my face all the time, it's hard for me.
Oh,
So
oh yeah.
when I was in Ethiopia, my twin younger brothers they have such a sweet tooth, and the way, just looking at them, they would just stuff it in their face, and just their cheeks filled with that cake, and I'm just looking at them. So because it was so in my face, I've come back
Yeah,
just a little bit, like, I'm struggling again with my sugar. I
yeah.
just keep thinking about that cake that I watched them eat, and I want it. And it's a drug, isn't it, sugar? I mean, it's so hard to not have. And when I know people who have been newly diagnosed with something, and I feel so sorry for them friends, and I'm like, well, and I want to tell them, well, what would help you get better if you don't have the sugar, you don't have the gluten, you don't have the dairy.
Yeah.
But then, and I've mentioned it, and then you just see their face drop, and it's like
Well, because it's in
they're
everything.
thinking, I
Yeah.
can't do that's a lot of things to give up. But then
Oh, yeah.
that if
Yeah.
they did it, they're gonna feel much better.
Yeah.
So you're delivering like this horrible news to them that you've done it, you've been through it, and you know how it feels, and you have to tell somebody else to go through it, but it's going to help them. But then they're like, do you know what? Actually, let me just carry on with my life at the moment, how it is, and I don't really want to give that stuff up. And then you're like, but then you're
Well,
not going to get better. But you don't
it's
want them
so
to go through the grief as
interesting.
well.
I I feel like I don't recall a moment where I felt deprived, where I was like feeling like I don't. That's why we really need to talk about diet, because I'm like, what is missing? I need to look into
Maybe
it.
you're not a sweet person. I mean, what is it for you that you really liked before that you can't do
Okay.
now?
Well, I mean, I was like you. I love cakes. I loved
Oh,
pastries. I loved baked goods. I was a dessert person, sugar
yeah.
addict. Like, oh my gosh, yes. Diet Coke. I was a big Diet Coke
Yeah.
fanatic every day. Diet Coke. We all have our vices, but that was
Exactly.
like
For me, that
definitely,
was easy
yeah,
to give up Coke and Sprite and all the fizzy drinks.
yeah.
I look at it now, I'm like, why would you drink that? It's easy for me to
But
give that
here's
up.
the thing
Yeah.
is, we have to look at emotional eating for
Mm-hmm.
what it is,
Mm,
addiction. And
mm,
that's why it's hard. It's an addiction, and food
yeah.
is everywhere, everywhere. You can't, it's not, it's down the streets, it's everywhere. It's so accessible, and So for instance, like you were mentioning the honey, like your husband was like, don't overindulge in honey, but you're at a place where it is safer for you right now to have to overindulge in honey than it is to deprive yourself and then go into eating that cake or eating
It's
whatever
not
it
even
is.
worth it.
That's yes. And I think that that's what helped me overcome my like the diet change was that I just allowed myself to meet myself where I was. Like, I really want, you know, spaghetti, let's say, or I don't know. Like, I would just go online, find a paleo version of it, and just cook it and just
That's
enjoy
not
it.
really the same. We know it.
But you know what? I just accepted that. I don't know. Maybe I just enjoyed that I had an option, or maybe I
It's
focused
really
on what
grateful.
I
Mm.
I don't yeah, I have to like what I was telling you earlier, I'm going back through the things that I share that helped me heal and I'm kind of dissecting it. And
Mhm.
because I feel like I'm at a place now where there's so much more science coming out that are supporting these fundamental truths that I'm saying, oh my gosh, this is why this was so effective. Here's the science. I know it's effective because I got my health back, but here's the science now that's like supporting why. And that's why I was like doing research on the sleep and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So I would love to share more on that. But diet, you have to maybe find the alternative of whatever you are craving and allow yourself to you know, eat that food and in a healthier way, even if you have to, let's say, eat a little bit more to feel more filled, whatever the case is. I just yeah, I need to look into it more.
Because there's so many things that you have to give up anyway. You even have to you give up, well, it's not that you have to give up, it's taken away from you. You're exhausted, you're fatigued. You have
Mhm.
to manage your life in this world that doesn't understand autoimmune disease, that doesn't understand an invisible disease. So you're suffering silently. You're exhausted already by your day, by life, by these tasks. Then
Yes.
you have to think
Yeah.
about the alternative of the foods that you want. You have to think about all the things you can't have. You have to read the label of everything, and it's just and you just want you sometimes you can do it for a while. I'm very good at being strict with things, but then there's some
Mhm.
days, maybe I think it's just before my period, where I'm emotional and all over the
Oh,
place,
yeah.
and I just wish I had what I had before. When I see people on TV or whatever and they're just eating that spaghetti, and they've never had the challenge of having to think, wait, I can't have this, or looking for a menu going, can't eat that, it's got gluten, da 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 da. They just eat whatever they want to eat when they want to eat it, just like I used to. So then I'm always
Mhm.
thinking about the times when I was able to just do all those things. You see, so,
Well,
that's what gets me all the time, the food.
I think that this conversation is kind of leading into what we want to do for our next podcast with this, which is the 5 love languages
Yeah.
and translating into your healing journey. Because I do think
Mm,
it's not a matter of making those changes, but making it in a way where you you can love the journey and maybe it's just approaching it at a different way. Um,
I think that's
because I
really
totally
profound. Yeah.
yeah, I totally hear you and I feel like I can tell you right now. Like I think that diet is just like there are certain food groups that you need to focus on to help you sustain. Like you were saying, you're feeling tired, you're feeling fatigued. Nutrition can be your best friend to help you get through that. And I find that having a diet that's high in healthy fats and protein definitely helped me sustain that so that I can make changes. So you kind of have to look at diet also strategically to set yourself up. Yeah, like the beginning may be challenging because it's something new. And I find that a lot of times the problem isn't the food. The problem is that you're having to think now on what foods can you eat. Before you had your go-to foods, you can do that autopilot. You could just go grab it, eat. You didn't even have to think about it. Now you're at a place where you have to pause and think. And that's the challenge, like, well, what can I eat? And what are good options? And I have to find a new recipe. And that gets overwhelming and that
Yeah.
saps your energy. And
Yeah. It adds to
um,
everything else. Just
it
whatever
adds to
you
everything
do.
else. Yeah. But there is a way that you can do this where you're not feeling deprived and starved. I always find that the people who do reach out to me who are expressing that emotion are people who are basing their health protocol off of somebody else's guide, a very specific like diet that this person is recommending them to do, which is like, I mean, if you feel good on it, do it. But if you're feeling like you're starving and you're about to lose it, it's not working. That's not.
You're going to find what's right for you. Yeah, that's true. There might be something out there that's right for you. Yeah.
If you feel that you're doing this certain diet and you're still feeling like something's missing, you need to do a little more tweaking. That might mean upping your healthy fats, upping your protein, upping your fruits or your veggies. It just depends. It could just be as simple as adding one more serving, food group or something.
Yeah, I think again it's that So I realize that, oh my gosh, when I have rice, I think I get even more exhausted, and I find the rest of the day even harder. Because my husband eats a lot of rice, and we end up eating it. When I was single by myself, I didn't make that much rice. I would eat other foods. I didn't have rice a lot, and living with him and everything, I eat a lot of rice, a lot of carbs. And I find myself getting exhausted. And it's not until I went to Ethiopia and spent a month of eating grain, which is like an ancient grain that is a part of the quinoa family, and it is what's the fiber? It's basically fiber. So, and it's fermented. And that's what they eat every day. I didn't have to think about what I was eating every day. I knew that all the food that I was eating in Ethiopia was healthy for me because it was vegetables, some proteins, and fiber. That was it every day.
And probiotic.
I felt strong. The probiotic.
Yeah, didn't you say that there was something fermented?
Yeah, it's fermented. Yeah. So it's called injera, and you use that to eat the food like this. So I ate that a lot for 1 month, and I didn't even realize that this was the food. This is the one that suits me. I don't feel tired. I stopped taking all my supplements. I feel strong. It's fortified with all these things, and it's easy. And I love it. It's tasty.
No question.
I found my.
I feel like you need to, whatever it is you're eating, you need to incorporate that fermented food.
For me,
more balance.
It's so important. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, or this is breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Rice. Yeah. Yes.
Because that's what I ate in Ethiopia every day. Because that's what they don't have rice. They don't have. It's this fermented food that everybody eats in the country, and you use that. You scoop up the food with the injera, and you eat with that. And you eat with your hands.
Yeah.
So there is no other option. So I was immersed in a diet without realizing it for 1 month, and it helped me so much. So now I'm trying to make it at home, and I enjoy it, and I'm happier. But that solves one part of my problem. But the sweet side of things is still something I need to work on. But it is important to find what works for you and realize what doesn't work for you and just stop it, because feeling unwell is not an option. I can't just keep eating the rice because I'm too tired to cook, and that's what's there. And no, it's going to harm. Like no, I'm not going to feel good about it. It's not, you just know on a level, like you should not. Maybe you should stop having that food and just listen to yourself. Because
I think it's important. Yes, you have to. You already said it. You said I don't feel well when I eat rice. You already know.
Yeah, I was thinking. I was like, I think it's rice.
And maybe you have to cut back your maybe you can't eat it, let's say 4 days a week. Maybe you feel good maybe just twice a week with it, or maybe you find that you have to accompany it with some type of fermented food in order to feel better. And which is kind of like what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
But you also have to be gentle with yourself and realize that sugar is an actual addiction. So it's not it's literally an addiction. And when I was dealing with my Candida diet and I cut out all sugar and carbs, that's when I realized how addictive it was. It's an addiction. So you kind of have to, I don't recommend going. It just depends on you if you want to go cold turkey with it, or if you need to do baby steps.
Well, I did in Ethiopia without even realizing it. See, I was enjoying myself too much. And I love my country food. So I didn't even think about it till I came back, and I thought, gosh, I just feel so good. I don't have to take my medication, like not medication, my supplements. I don't feel as fatigued. And then I started to eat rice sometimes, and I thought, oh no, I'm tired again. Why do I feel tired? What did I eat last night? Or what did I eat just now?
Mhm.
Rice. Maybe it's, just
Mhm.
trying to connect the dots.
Yes. Yeah, you have to connect the dots like that. And
Mm.
you're just describing the healing journey. That's what it
Yeah,
is.
yeah,
And it's being intuitive and understand and trusting yourself. And I find that that's where a lot of people get lost, is because they have this recognition of, I don't feel well when I eat this, this, and this. But then they go online and somebody is telling them, you just need to do X, Y, and Z. And then they just stop what they're doing, and then they do what the X, Y, and Z is the recommendation, and then they're in this loop.
Right.
Whereas you need to learn to just grab information that serves you, and not so much, assume that you have to do everything exactly the same like somebody else is telling you, especially when you are already kind of molding an idea of what is making you not feel well. You have to trust yourself, and I think a lot of us, we write off that trusting ourselves to somebody else. Well, I'll just trust them because they've been through it and this is what worked for them. But
Exactly. And it's okay to like take something from here. Whatever feels good for you, keep it. Whatever doesn't, don't do it anymore. So I used to have so many things that I thought I had to do. I have to do like these 10 things in the morning in order to have a good day. I have to meditate. I have to do the yoga. I have to drink the water. Then I thought, okay, I'm not enjoying this. And I'm finding it hard to upkeep. Why?
yeah,
And then I realized, okay, you know what the two things I can do? I can take my probiotics and drink water in the morning, and I feel great. Those two things work for me. I keep that, and I upkeep with it because I enjoy doing it. It's become part of my habit now. As soon as I wake up, have my probiotics and start the day like that. So yeah, I don't know. I guess you're so desperate to heal. I think being desperate doesn't help as well, but of course you just want
Oh
your
yeah.
life back so much.
Yeah.
So I realized that being desperate is not the way to do it, and just enjoy the healing journey. So I tell
Yeah.
myself now with things, just enjoy it, enjoy doing things, and whatever makes you happy, carry on doing it, Meron. So it's like talking to myself,
Yes. That's
tweaking
that's the love language that we're going to get into. You have to learn to fall in love with the healing journey. Otherwise, it's not going to be sustainable. You're going to find yourself, speaking somebody else's love language into your healing journey, and you're going to be so disconnected, and you're going to blame yourself. It's not you. You have to learn to communicate. Just like we learn to communicate with others and their needs, you have to learn to communicate with yourself and your needs. And
Absolutely.
I think that the 5 languages can be like a good guide to kind of tap into
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah.
We can take the quiz. You and I were talking that we need to retest it because
Yeah.
your love language can change throughout the years. So
I'm absolutely gonna
we're
do
going to
that.
take the quiz. I'm going to
Yes.
send you the link.
Yes. I'm so
So we can
curious
take
to
it.
see. Yeah, and you can
Yeah.
apply it to all aspects of your life with your relationships.
Oh,
Get your
yes.
family to do the quiz, or your husband to do the quiz, and
Yes.
this is but using it for healing is such a unique concept, I think, and I'm so interested to see if it
Yeah.
helps people, if it helps me, if it helps you. Let's see.
I feel like when we were talking about it, I was realizing, like right now when you were mentioning your relationship with like the diet change, and I was like, that's so interesting because I never felt deprived. I think that subconsciously I am really in tune with my own love language, for a lack of a different word, or like what
Mhm.
I need that gives me, that
Mm.
fills my cup. And I've kind of learned to I was tweaking the health journey, or I was following my health journey according to what felt good to me. Like, okay, I feel good starting here. I'm going to focus on this, and then this, and then this. And every single time I was doing that, I was feeling better and better and better. And I was able to do more and more and more. So it was never about tackling everything at once. It was just starting where I felt like
Mhm.
I had the motivation and will to
Yeah,
start. And so
that's
I
very
always, I
practical.
did,
A practical way of doing
yeah,
it.
you have to work with your will. And I
Mm.
think that's a good kind of guide, like where do I have, or maybe,
Mm.
I don't know if people understand their will, like where they can have the motivation versus they don't have the motivation. So if you're finding yourself forcing something, maybe that's not the right place to start. and you can start.
If there's resistance, change course, next path, next thing, try something else.
Because that's what we're trying to share is the message of falling in love with healing. So it can be sustainable. For me too, diet changes, I didn't miss it because I actually felt better. I had leaky gut. So eating gluten was very painful experience.
Yeah,
I don't know why I keep doing it. And then it wasn't until,
it's like self-sabotaging.
It's self-sabotaging. And then during that time, it was like maybe 2010 time. I found Dr. Mark Hyman on YouTube. He was huge on leaky gut and food and gluten sensitivity. And I was realizing everything that he was sharing about gluten sensitivities were like almost the exact symptoms I was dealing with. So when I eliminated it, I felt such a relief that I didn't want to eat it again. And maybe that's why I enjoyed the gluten-free options, not so much because I wasn't thinking like, oh, I'm missing how the gluten tastes. I was like, oh my gosh, I can eat and not have pain, run to the restroom and have a horrible experience. I was just able to
benefits outweigh it. So then you carry on doing it. Exactly. That's why I take my freezing cold showers in the morning. Even if it's cold outside, I know that I'm going to feel so good. And it's going to feel like I've just had a mini spa day. Even though I don't want to do it, but I do want to do it because of the benefits of just get in there and I just do it. And
I need to do that.
The benefits outweigh the thing. It's so much so good. It's easier to implement. Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. We have to weigh the risks all the time. That's how it is with conventional medicine anyways. And I've shared that too before, that everything has risks. Whether you decide to take medication, whether you decide to do radioactive iodine or a thyroidectomy, or whether you don't, every decision you do carries a risk. Just be aware.
Yeah.
Just know your risks. Yeah. And make sure that it's fit for you,
Wow. I hope that everybody finds this podcast really helpful. I've come away with learning things. I'm going to find my love language in relation to my healing journey and I think I found my will. But yeah, it's going to be I hope that this was a really good podcast that resonated with a lot of people. Yeah,
me too. I think that we talked a lot of different topics, but I think that grief kind of leads you through these emotions of high and lows. Like grief led me to realize I had an emotional eating habit disorder. I don't know what you would call it.
Yeah.
It just makes you kind of have to face your other, what would you call it? It makes you have to face yourself sometimes, your addictions.
See what it's there to teach you.
Yeah.
See it like the value. It's there to find the value in the valley. Find the value in the valley, and figure out you're getting back to the healing journey. Figure out a way to get back to the healing journey. So that is the end of this week's Thyroid Sisters Navigate Graves' Disease podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you found it useful and enjoyable. Please do follow and subscribe to our podcast so that you are the first to hear about new episodes.
And if you're enjoying them, please leave us a 5-star rating, as this will help us so much. The bigger the show gets, the bigger the awareness raised.
You can find us on social media using the handle @lovingmekindly and also the handle @healing_unapologetically. Until next time.